My name is Nora. I'm 28 years old, and for 6 years, my husband and his mother treated me like an ATM they were secretly ashamed to use. I kept telling myself I just needed to try harder to finally earn my place in their family. But the day everything cracked open was the morning after I won $412,000 in the state lottery. Instead of celebrating, my husband packed his bags, dragged them into the kitchen, and demanded half the money to leave me. His mother stood right beside him, actually spit at my feet and sneered, "He wasted 6 years on you, pay up or we sue." My best friend dropped her coffee mug on the counter in pure shock. The spit gleamed against the hardwood floor. I paid the mortgage. They complained about the house. I worked double shifts. They called me neglectful. I thought I was the problem. I was wrong. He thought he had already backed me into a corner. He had no idea what I was pulling out of my purse. I slid a thick yellow envelope across the kitchen island, 19 pages of his secret, ruinous gambling debts. It was the exact proof that was about to make his mother faint right there on the floor, destroy their entire financial facade, and leave him with absolutely nothing. Before I go on, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now let me take you back to 4 months ago, the night the first collection notice arrived in the mail. My marriage didn't fall apart in a single night. It was more like a slow, steady leak that I kept trying to patch with extra shifts and forced smiles. For 6 years, I was the one who kept the lights on, the fridge full, and the mortgage paid. I thought that's what a good wife did. I thought if I carried enough of the weight, eventually Mark would stand up and help me. I remember coming home 4 months ago after a 16-hour double shift at the hospital. My feet were throbbing, and my back felt like it was being pulled apart by hot wires. When I walked through the front door, the house smelled like expensive takeout, Thai food from the place downtown that charges $20 for a basic curry. Mark was on the sofa, his feet up on the coffee table I'd spent 3 weekends refinishing. His mother, Lorraine, was sitting in my favorite armchair, sipping a glass of wine that I'd bought for a special occasion we never actually had. "You're late," Lorraine said, not looking up from the television. "The kitchen is a mess, Nora. I don't know how you expect Mark to relax in a pigsty." I looked at the sink. It was overflowing with the containers from their dinner. I hadn't even eaten yet. "I just finished a double, Lorraine," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm exhausted." Mark didn't look over. He was tapping away on his phone, his thumb moving a mile a minute. "We all have hard days, Nor. Just get it handled so we can watch the movie. It's hard to focus with the clutter." I didn't argue. I never did. I walked to the kitchen, opened my laptop on the island, and logged into our banking portal. It was the first of the month. I watched the numbers drop as I sent the mortgage payment to the bank. $2,100. Gone. That was almost my entire paycheck for the last 2 weeks. I looked at the joint savings tab. It was sitting at $412. It should have been $5,000. We were supposed to be saving for a new HVAC system because ours had been rattling for months. "Mark, did you move money from the savings?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Needed to cover some car stuff," he called out from the living room. "Don't nag me about it now. We're resting." I looked at the stack of mail sitting by the fruit bowl. It was mostly flyers and grocery coupons, but tucked in the middle was a thick white envelope with a plastic window. I reached for it, my hands shaking from a mix of fatigue and a sudden, cold instinct. It was addressed to Mark, but the return address was a law firm specializing in debt collection. I felt a pit form in my stomach. I had been working 60 hours a week so he could find himself in his freelance work, yet we were falling behind on things I didn't even know we owed. "Nora, the dishes," Lorraine shouted, "and bring me a refill while you're up. This Chardonnay is a bit dry, but it'll do." I looked at the debt notice, then at the woman who treated my home like a hotel, and finally at my husband, who hadn't looked at me once since I walked through the door. I realized then that I wasn't a partner. I was an appliance. I was a high-functioning ATM that also happened to scrub the floors. I didn't open the letter that night. I tucked it under a pile of magazines. I told myself it was probably a mistake. I wanted so badly for it to be a mistake because the alternative meant my entire life was a lie. I spent the next hour scrubbing dried peanut sauce off the counters while they laughed at a sitcom in the other room. I didn't get a thank you. I didn't even get a "how was your day?" That was the night I stopped feeling like I belonged in my own skin. I was carrying the weight of 3 people, and I was starting to snap. I looked at the mail stack one last time before going to bed. That was the first lie. The next morning, I didn't go to sleep. I waited until I heard Mark's heavy snoring and Lorraine's car pulling out of the driveway. I sat at the kitchen table with that collection notice. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. I used a butter knife to slide the envelope open, hoping it was just a medical bill or a late credit card payment I'd overlooked. It wasn't. It was a formal demand for $14,000 from a private lending group I'd never heard of. The interest rate was astronomical. The letter stated this was the final notice before they initiated a lawsuit and moved to place a lien on our property. Our property. My house. The one I'd put every bonus and every holiday shift into securing. I walked into the bedroom and shook Mark's shoulder. He groaned and pulled the duvet over his head. I pulled it back. "Mark, wake up. What is this?" I held the paper in front of his face. He blinked, squinting at the letter. For a split second, I saw pure, naked panic in his eyes. Then, like a shutter closing, his face went flat. He snatched the paper out of my hand. "Where did you get this? You're going through my mail now." "It was on the counter, Mark. It says we're being sued. Who are these people?" He sat up, rubbing his face. "It's a clerical error, Nora. I told you I was doing some freelance consulting for a startup. They messed up the tax filings and some of the short-term bridge loans. I'm handling it. You don't need to go all detective on me." $14,000 isn't a clerical error, I said. And the savings account is empty. Where is the money, Mark? "I moved it to a high-yield account to protect it while I settle this," he snapped. He stood up, towering over me, using that tone he always used when he wanted me to feel small. "God, you're so suspicious. This is why I don't tell you things. You stress out over every little cent. Go to work, Nora. Let the man of the house handle the finances for once." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. If he was lying, it meant I was married to a stranger. I went to work, but I couldn't focus. Every time a monitor beeped or a patient called out, I saw that dollar amount in my head. $14,000. That was more than I made in 3 months of overtime. When I got home that afternoon, Lorraine was back. She was in the kitchen, reorganizing my pantry. She had thrown away 3 boxes of my favorite tea because they looked cluttered. "Mark told me you had a little meltdown this morning," she said, not looking at me. "You really need to work on your temperament, Nora. Stress is a choice. If you just focus on keeping a peaceful home instead of auditing your husband, you'd be much happier." "He's hiding debt, Lorraine," I said. She turned around, her eyes cold. "He is trying to build a future for you. He's a dreamer, and dreamers need support, not a warden. If you're worried about money, maybe you should pick up those weekend shifts they offered. I heard you turn them down. That seems a bit selfish, don't you think? Given how hard Mark is working behind the scenes." I felt a chill go down my spine. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't worried about the lawsuit. She was defending him with a practiced ease that made me realize this wasn't the first time she'd covered for him. That evening, I did something I'd never done in 6 years of marriage. I waited until Mark went to the gym, and I sat down at his computer. He'd left his browser open. He always forgot to clear his history because he thought I was too tech illiterate to check. I started with the history. It wasn't work. It wasn't freelance consulting. It was page after page of digital poker rooms and sports betting sites. I saw logins for offshore accounts. I saw emails from VIP hosts congratulating him on his recent play while reminding him of outstanding markers. I felt sick. I actually had to run to the bathroom and throw up. I went back to the computer and opened our joint savings history. I went back 6 months. I saw the transfers. $500 here, $1,200 there. It was a slow bleed, timed perfectly with the days my paycheck hit the account. He was waiting for my money to land, then skimming the top before I could even budget for the bills. Then I found the worst part. He had opened a credit card in my name. I saw the digital statement. A platinum rewards card I'd never applied for, used exclusively for deposits into a betting app. The balance was $8,500. The billing address had been changed to Lorraine's house. My credit, which I'd spent my entire adult life keeping perfect, was being dismantled while I slept in the next room. My peace of mind didn't just crack, it shattered. The damage was real now. It wasn't just a bad patch in a marriage, it was a theft. He was stealing my hours, my labor, and my future to fund a fantasy life where he didn't have to work. And his mother was the one helping him hide the trail. I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. I heard Mark's car pull into the driveway. I heard him whistling as he walked to the door, probably thinking about his next consulting move. I realized I couldn't just confront him again. He'd just lie better. He'd move the trail further underground. If I was going to survive this, I had to stop being the ATM and start being the auditor. I closed the laptop and went to the bedroom. I pretended to be asleep when he came in. I felt him kiss my forehead, a gesture that used to make me feel loved but now made my skin crawl. He was checking to see if I was still under his spell. I knew then what I had to do. I needed to see exactly how deep this hole went. I needed to see every single cent they had taken from me. I stopped crying that night. I had work to do. The following week felt like I was living two lives. In one, I was the quiet wife, nodding along while Lorraine lectured me about how proper families didn't discuss money at the dinner table. In the other, I was a ghost in my own house, documenting every scrap of evidence I could find. I started picking up the extra weekend shifts Lorraine had suggested. Not because she told me to, but because I needed the house empty so I could search. They thought I was being a good, compliant little earner. "That's more like it, Nora," Lorraine said on Saturday morning as I put on my scrubs. "You're finally showing some initiative. Mark was worried you were becoming a bit stagnant. A woman's value is in her industry, you know." She said this while sitting on my patio, drinking coffee I'd paid for, waiting for Mark to wake up at noon. Mark was exhausted from a week of what he called networking. I knew better. I'd seen the history on his phone again. He'd been up until 4:00 a.m. betting on overseas basketball games. While I was at the hospital, I'd check the Ring camera on my phone. Mark's car would pull out around 1:00 p.m. He'd head straight to Lorraine's. One afternoon, I claimed I had a migraine and came home early. I didn't pull into the driveway. I parked 3 houses down and walked through the back alley. I could hear them through the open kitchen window. "He just needs one big win, Lorraine." Mark's voice was strained, high-pitched in a way it never was with me. "I'm down $6,000 on the season, but the algorithm is solid. I just need a stake to cover the spread on the playoffs." "I know, honey," Lorraine replied. I heard the distinct thwack of an envelope hitting the table. "This is from my emergency fund. It's $4,000. Don't tell Nora. She's already being difficult about that collection letter." "She's fine," Mark scoffed. "She's working 3 weekends this month. She'll have the mortgage covered by the 15th. She's a workhorse, Mom. She likes feeling needed." Well, she needs to feel less needed and more grateful, Lorraine said. She's lucky to have a man with your vision. Just make sure you delete the apps from the tablet before she gets home. I stood in the weeds behind my own garage, sweating in my blue scrubs. The workhorse. That's what I was to them. I wasn't a person with dreams or exhaustion. I was a utility. They were funding his addiction with my labor, using me as the safety net while they jumped off the cliff. I realized then that the house was at risk. If Mark was taking private loans from groups and using my name for credit cards, it was only a matter of time before they came for the deed. I went back to the hospital and sat in the parking lot for an hour. I didn't cry. The time for crying had ended when I heard his mother call me a workhorse. I called the bank and asked for a full history of our mortgage payments. "Ma'am," the teller said, her voice hesitant, "is there a reason you're asking for the escrow details? We sent a notice about the missed insurance premiums last month." Missed premiums? I felt the air leave my lungs. I pay the mortgage every month. The insurance is bundled. "It was," she said, "but someone called in and requested a partial refund of the escrow overage in February. The check was mailed and cashed. Your account is currently in a deficit of $3,200. If it isn't cleared, the bank will force place insurance, which will double your monthly payment." Mark had intercepted the overage check. He had stolen the money meant to keep the roof over our heads. I went inside and worked my shift. I cleaned up after patients who were kinder to me than my husband. I stayed late to help a nurse who was struggling with a heavy intake. I did it all with a face of stone. When I got home that night, the house was dark except for the light in the kitchen. Mark was there, looking through a folder of papers. When he saw me, he jumped and tried to shove them into a drawer. "Hey, Nor, you're late. I was just organizing some tax stuff." "Good," I said, my voice dead. "We need to be organized." The phone rang on the counter. Mark reached for it, but I was closer. I saw the caller ID. It was a local number, but underneath, the carrier had flagged it as Debt Solutions. I answered it. "Hello. Is this Nora?" a woman asked. She sounded tired. "I'm calling regarding the $22,000 personal consolidation loan. We haven't received the signed digital affidavit for the cosigner yet. Since the primary borrower, Mark, listed you as the guarantor, we need that signature tonight or the offer expires." 22,000, on top of the 14, on top of the credit card. I looked at Mark. He was staring at me, his face pale in the fluorescent kitchen light. He reached for the phone. "I'll take that," he whispered. "It's just a business thing." I didn't give him the phone. I looked him right in the eye and hung up. "That was a loan agency, Mark," I said. "They have the wrong number," he said, the lie coming out of his mouth as smooth as oil. "I'm telling you, it's a clerical error. My freelance client probably used my name as a reference. I'll call them tomorrow and chew them out." He actually looked offended. He was playing the victim in a crime he was currently committing. I looked past him at the drawer where he'd hidden the papers. I knew what was in there. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just went to the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub and realized that if I didn't move fast, he was going to sink me entirely. He was drowning, and he was using my head as a stepping stone to keep his own nose above water. He wasn't just gambling with money. He was gambling with my life. I knew what he was doing. I knew who was helping him. And for the first time in 6 years, I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. The exhaustion didn't feel like sleepiness anymore. It felt like a heavy, gray fog that settled into my bones and stayed there. I was working 3 double shifts a week now, partly because I needed the money to stop the foreclosure clock, and partly because I couldn't stand the sight of Mark's face. Every time he smiled at me, I saw a predator checking to see if the prey was still breathing. I was in the hospital break room at 3:00 a.m. staring at a vending machine. I couldn't remember if I'd eaten since yesterday morning. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my change. It rolled under the fridge and I just stood there watching it go. I didn't have the strength to bend down and get it. "Nora, what are you doing?" I turned around. Chloe, my best friend since nursing school, was standing in the doorway with 2 coffees. She looked at me, then at my shaking hands, and her face went from tired to worried in a second. "I'm fine," I said. "Just a long shift." "Bull," she said. She pushed a coffee into my hand and steered me toward a chair. "You've lost weight. You have circles under your eyes that look like bruises. And I saw you crying in the supply closet yesterday. Talk to me." I tried to keep the wall up. I tried to give her the marriage is hard speech I'd practiced, but I looked at her and the wall just crumbled. I told her about the $22,000 loan. I told her about the credit card in my name. I told her about the Thai food and the Chardonnay and the workhorse comment. "I think we're going bankrupt, Chloe," I whispered. "I think he's already spent money that doesn't exist. I'm working myself to death to pay for bets he's making while I'm at the bedside of dying patients." Chloe didn't say anything for a long time. She just gripped her coffee cup until her knuckles were white. "Nora, this isn't a rough patch," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is financial abuse. He is stealing your identity and your labor. If he puts a lien on that house, you lose everything you've worked for since you were 22. "No," I said, "but he says it's all a mistake. He says he's handling it." "He's handling you," she snapped. "He's keeping you in the dark so you keep the lights on." The spillover was starting to affect my work. Later that night, I almost administered the wrong dosage of a sedative because my mind was busy calculating how many hours of overtime it would take to cover the $3,200 escrow deficit. I caught the mistake at the last second, my heart racing, my stomach turning. I realized then that Mark wasn't just ruining my credit, he was ruining my career. If I made a mistake here, I wouldn't just be broke, I'd be jobless and stripped of my license. I went back to the break room and found Chloe. "I can't do this anymore," I told her. "I'm going to kill someone or myself if I keep trying to carry this secret." Chloe pulled out her phone. "My cousin works in forensic accounting, not the fancy corporate kind, the kind that helps people in nasty divorces. We are going to run a full credit sweep and a background check on Mark. Every account, every shadow, every hidden debt." "I don't have the money to pay an accountant," I said. "I'll pay it," Chloe said. "Consider it an investment in your life, but you have to promise me one thing, Nora." "What?" "When we find out how deep this goes, you don't give him another chance. You don't listen to Lorraine, you get out." I looked at the coffee in my hand. It was cold. I thought about the house, the one with the rattling HVAC and the kitchen where I wasn't allowed to be tired. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a cage where the bars were made of debt. "I promise," I said. The next 3 days were a blur of paranoia. I had to keep the act up at home. I watched Mark laugh at a football game on TV, knowing he probably had $500 riding on the point spread. I watched Lorraine criticize the way I folded the towels, knowing she had $4,000 of her emergency fund sitting in his gambling account. I felt like a spy in my own life. I started checking the mail before it even hit the porch, intercepting letters from credit card companies and collection agencies. I found 3 more. One was a notice of intent to accelerate. They were moving toward foreclosure on the house. I didn't confront him. I didn't show him the letter. I took a photo of it and sent it to Chloe. My throat felt tight every time I looked at him. I realized I didn't love him anymore. I was just afraid of him. I was afraid of what else he had done while I was trusting him. The dread was a physical weight now. It was in my chest, making every breath feel shallow. I knew something was coming. I knew the truth was going to be worse than I imagined. "We're running the report tonight," Chloe texted me during my lunch break. "Come over after your shift." "Don't tell him where you're going." "I'll be there," I replied. I worked my 8 hours with a strange, cold focus. I didn't stumble, I didn't miss a beat. I was waiting for the floor to drop out and I wanted to be standing upright when it happened. That was the trap. I thought I was just protecting my money. I didn't realize I was fighting for my soul. I pulled into Chloe's driveway at midnight. My hands were still cold from the hospital air conditioning and my head was spinning. She was waiting at the door, her laptop open on the small dining table. She didn't offer me a drink. She didn't make small talk. She just pointed at the screen. "Nora, sit down," she said. Her voice was flat. "My cousin stayed up late to finish the sweep. It's bad. It's worse than the collection's letters." I sat. I looked at the spreadsheet. It wasn't just a list of debts. It was a map of a betrayal that had been mapped out for years. Mark hadn't just made a few bad bets. He had systematically liquidated every safety net we had. There were 19 pages of itemized online gambling transactions. Some were for $50, some were for $5,000. They went back to our second year of marriage. While I was saving for our first house, he was losing $300 a night on digital blackjack. "Look at the dates, Nora," Chloe whispered. I leaned in. The largest deposits coincided with my bonus checks. They matched the week I got my inheritance from my grandmother. Every time I brought home extra money to get ahead, he saw it as a fresh stake for the table. "He opened 4 more credit cards using your social security number," Chloe said, scrolling down. "He used your maiden name on 2 of them but linked them to your current credit profile. The total secret debt, not including the mortgage deficit, is $114,000. The number didn't even feel real. It was a ghost number. It was more than I earned in 2 years of working double shifts. "And here's the kicker," Chloe continued. "He's been making minimum payments from a hidden account that Lorraine co-signed. She's been helping him shuffle the balances to keep the collectors from calling your cell phone. They were keeping the plates spinning just enough so you wouldn't notice until the house was gone." I felt a strange, cold clarity wash over me. For months, I'd been blaming myself for being tired or not enough. I'd been listening to Lorraine tell me I was a failure as a wife because I didn't keep the kitchen clean enough. All the while, they were both standing over a hole they'd dug, waiting for me to fall in so they could use my body to climb out. "I'm not a wife," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "I'm a policy. I'm an insurance plan." "You're a victim of marital dissipation of assets," a new voice said. I jumped. A man was sitting in the shadows of Chloe's living room. He stood up and walked into the light. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "This is Marcus," Chloe said. "He's a family law attorney. He specializes in financial fraud within marriages. I asked him to look at the preliminary report." Marcus sat across from me. He didn't offer a sympathetic smile, which I appreciated. He just laid out a folder. "Nora, if you file for divorce now, and we can prove these debts were incurred for non-marital purposes, specifically illegal or unauthorized gambling, we can argue that they are his sole responsibility. But we have to act before he files for bankruptcy. If he files first, he might try to drag the house into the liquidation to pay off his personal markers." "He's planning something," I said, remembering the consulting talk and the secret folders. "He's trying to get me to sign a co-signer affidavit for another $22,000. "Don't sign anything," Marcus said. "In fact, don't even tell him you know. If he senses you're onto him, he'll drain the last of the equity in the house or disappear with whatever cash is left in your joint accounts." I looked at the 19 pages. Each line was a slap in the face. Each transaction was a night I'd spent working while he sat in the dark, throwing my life away. I felt the last shred of my loyalty snap. It didn't hurt, it just felt like a weight being removed. "What do I do?" I asked. "We document everything," Marcus said. "We build a wall around your assets. I've already drafted a separation agreement that identifies these debts as his. We just need the right moment to serve him somewhere he can't lie his way out of it. Chloe stood up and went to her printer. It whirred to life, spitting out page after page of Mark's secret life. The gambling logs, the credit applications, the emails to Lorraine asking for bridge loans to cover his losses. She gathered the warm paper and slid it into a thick yellow envelope. She handed it to me. "This is your life back, Nora," she said. "Keep it in your purse. Don't let it out of your sight. When the time comes, you use this to stop the bleeding." I took the envelope. It was heavy. It felt like a weapon. I drove home in the pre-dawn light. Mark was still asleep, his mouth open, looking peaceful. I looked at him and didn't see the man I'd married. I saw a parasite. I saw a man who had been slowly eating my future for 6 years. I tucked the yellow envelope into the bottom of my nursing bag, hidden under my stethoscope and an extra pair of socks. I sat in the kitchen and waited for the sun to come up. I wasn't a workhorse anymore. I was a witness. I went to the gas station that morning to get a coffee before my shift. I was feeling reckless, or maybe I just wanted to feel like money could be something other than a curse. I bought a $2 state lottery ticket. I didn't even look at it. I just shoved it in my pocket and went to work. I didn't know then that the universe was about to give me the ultimate test. I didn't know that within 24 hours, I'd be holding the kind of money that would make Mark and Lorraine show their true faces once and for all. I just knew I had 19 pages of truth in my bag. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I sat in the hospital parking lot at the end of my shift, the yellow envelope resting heavy on the passenger seat. My phone was buzzing with texts from Mark. "Where are you? Mom's here. We're hungry." I didn't reply. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled lottery ticket I'd bought that morning. I scanned it with the state lottery app on my phone, mostly just to feel the mechanical routine of a small hope. The screen didn't show a try again message. It flashed a series of gold coins and a number that didn't make sense. $412,000. I blinked. I closed the app and opened it again. I scanned it a second time. The number stayed. My hands started to shake, but not the way they did from exhaustion. This was different. This was the sound of a cage door swinging open. I called Marcus, the attorney, immediately. "I just won the lottery," I whispered. $412,000. There was a long silence on the other end. "Nora, do not tell him. Do not deposit that check into any joint account. If you do, that money becomes a marital asset and he'll have a legal claim to half of it despite the gambling debts." "I haven't told anyone but you," I said. "What do I do?" "Go to the lottery office first thing in the morning," Marcus said. "Claim it in your name only. I'm sending you a secure digital folder. Upload those 19 pages of debt records now. I'm going to finalize the separation agreement and the dissipation claim tonight. We're going to tie his gambling losses directly to the money he's already stolen from you. If he tries to sue for the lottery winnings, we'll countersue for the $114,000 he's already gambled away. He won't win." I felt a surge of cold adrenaline. I wasn't just a nurse with a stethoscope and a tired back anymore. I was a woman with a plan and the resources to execute it. I drove to Chloe's house first. We stood in her kitchen and she looked at the ticket, then at the app, then at me. "This is it," she said, her eyes tearing up. "This is your exit, Nora, but you have to be careful. They're going to smell it on you. People like Mark and Lorraine have a radar for when the ATM is about to run dry." "I'm not giving them a cent," I said. "Not a single penny." I spent the next 4 hours with Chloe, scanning every single page of the debt records. We made 3 digital backups and put them on encrypted thumb drives. One went into her safe, one stayed with me, and one was couriered to Marcus's office. The leverage was real now. I had the proof of his ruin, and I had the funds to walk away. But I knew Mark. If I just left, he'd find a way to make himself the victim. He'd tell the neighborhood I abandoned him. He'd tell the bank I was the one who stopped paying the mortgage. I needed him to show his hand first. I needed him to prove exactly who he was in front of a witness. I went home around 9:00 p.m. The house was dark except for the flickering blue light of the TV. Mark was on the couch, surrounded by empty beer bottles. Lorraine was asleep in the guest room, her expensive moisturizer smelling up the hallway. "You're late again," Mark muttered, not looking at me. "I had to order pizza. I put it on your card because I'm tapped out until that consulting check clears." "That's fine, Mark," I said softly. I walked past him, my nursing bag tight against my side. "I have some news, but it can wait until the morning." "News, you getting a raise?" He perked up slightly, finally turning his head. "Something like that," I said. I went into the bedroom and locked the door. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the yellow envelope. I thought about the 6 years I'd spent trying to be enough for a man who was actively erasing me. I thought about the spit-flecked lectures from Lorraine about my value as a wife. I felt a strange sense of peace. The trap was set, but it wasn't mine. It was theirs. They had built it out of greed and lies, and tomorrow they were going to walk right into it. I checked my email. Marcus had sent the finalized documents. The separation agreement was clear. Mark was responsible for all debts incurred in his name and through the fraudulent use of my identity. The lottery winnings, claimed after the date of legal separation, would be protected. I just had to sign. I pulled out my laptop and signed the digital papers at 2:00 a.m. I felt a phantom weight lift off my shoulders. I was legally separated. I was a lottery winner. And I was still, for a few more hours, the workhorse they thought they owned. I looked out the window at the quiet street. I loved this house once. I thought we'd raise children here. Now it just felt like a crime scene. "I'm done," I whispered to the empty room. I tucked the ticket into a hidden pocket in my wallet. I put the yellow envelope back in my bag. I was ready. I just had to wait for the sun to come up and for the vultures to start circling. They had no idea what was coming. They thought they were about to get a payday. They were about to get a reckoning. The morning of the win didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a countdown. I woke up at 5:00 a.m., showered and dressed in my best professional clothes, not my scrubs. I needed to look like someone who made decisions, not someone who took orders. I drove to the lottery headquarters the moment they opened. The process was surprisingly quiet. A woman in a gray suit verified the ticket, took my identification, and explained the tax withholdings. When she handed me the receipt for the direct deposit of $412,000, I didn't cheer. I just folded it carefully and put it in my wallet next to my nursing license. "Is everything okay, dear?" the clerk asked. Usually people are jumping up and down. "Everything is finally clear," I told her. I drove back to the house. My heart was a steady, heavy drum in my chest. I called Chloe on the way. "I have the receipt," I said. "Are you ready?" "I'm already in your driveway," she replied. I brought my witness face and a fresh pot of coffee. If they're going to act like animals, I want to be there to record the zoo. I pulled in 10 minutes later. Chloe was sitting on the porch steps, holding a thermal carafe. She looked at me, saw my face, and just nodded. We walked into the kitchen together. The house smelled like stale beer and Lorraine's heavy floral perfume. Mark was at the kitchen island, hunched over his laptop, his shoulders tense. Lorraine was standing at the stove, making herself an omelet in my favorite copper pan. "Where have you been?" Mark snapped, not looking up. "I've been trying to call you. That debt agency called again. They're threatening to start the legal filing by noon if we don't provide the co-signer's signature." "I was taking care of things, Mark," I said. I sat down at the island, directly across from him. Chloe stood by the counter, leaning back, her eyes tracking every movement in the room. "Taking care of what?" Lorraine asked, turning around with a spatula in her hand. You look like you're dressed for a funeral, Nora, and why is Chloe here? This is a family discussion. It is a family discussion, I said, and Chloe is my family. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the lottery receipt. I laid it flat on the granite countertop. I didn't say a word. I just let the numbers do the talking. Mark leaned forward. I watched his eyes scan the paper. I watched the moment he saw the $412,000. The color drained from his face, then rushed back in a hot, frantic red. He let out a breath that sounded like a whistle. Nora, he whispered, is this real? It's real, I said. Lorraine dropped her spatula. It hit the floor with a metallic clang. She scurried over, leaning over Mark's shoulder to stare at the receipt. Her eyes widened, and for the first time in 6 years, she looked at me with something that wasn't contempt, it was hunger. Oh, Nora, she breathed. My goodness, this changes everything. This is a blessing, a total blessing. We can pay off the consulting loans, Mark said, his voice gaining strength. He was already leaning back, his chest puffing out. We can fix the HVAC. We can finally get that boat I was looking at for the lake house. God, Nor, I knew you'd come through for us. Us? I asked. Of course us, Lorraine said, reaching out to pat my hand. I pulled it away before she could touch me. She didn't even blink. We're a family. We've all been under so much stress. This money is going to wipe the slate clean. We can start fresh. I looked at Mark. He was already reaching for the receipt, his fingers twitching. I'll call the debt agency right now. I'll tell them we're liquid. We should probably move this into a trust, something I can manage so we don't blow it on taxes. He thought I was still the ATM. He thought the workhorse had just brought home a giant bale of hay for the whole stable. He actually smiled at me, that crooked, boyish smile he used whenever he wanted a favor. I have some news too, I said, my voice steady. But it's not about the boat. Whatever it is, we'll handle it, Mark said dismissively. Mom, get some glasses. We should toast to this. Nora, hand me the laptop. I need to check the payoff amounts for those credit cards. No, I said. The room went quiet. Lorraine stopped halfway to the cupboard. Mark froze, his hand inches from my receipt. What do you mean, no? Mark asked. I mean you aren't touching this money, I said, and neither is your mother. Mark laughed, but it was a nervous, jagged sound. Come on, Nor, don't be like that. I know things have been tense, but I've been working hard to secure our future. This win is a team effort. If I hadn't been consulting and keeping us afloat, we wouldn't even be here. Keeping us afloat? I looked at Chloe. She reached into my nursing bag and pulled out the thick yellow envelope. She slid it across the island. It landed right on top of the lottery receipt. What's this? Lorraine asked, her voice turning sharp again. The blessing tone was gone. That, I said, is 19 pages of why you are never touching a cent of my money again. Mark looked at the envelope. He didn't open it. He didn't have to. He knew exactly what was inside. The sweat started to bead on his forehead, and he looked at the door like he was considering running. Nora, let's talk about this privately, Mark said, his voice dropping to a low, pleading hiss. Chloe doesn't need to be here for this. It's a marital matter. It's a public matter now, Mark, I said, because I've already filed the papers. I felt the shift in the room. The air grew heavy, like it does right before a storm breaks. I was standing on the threshold. I had the truth in my hand, and I had the exit in my pocket. Open it, Mark, I said. Show your mother what your consulting actually looks like. He didn't move. He just stared at the yellow paper like it was a bomb. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 10:15 a.m. In less than an hour, my life as I knew it would be over. And for the first time in 6 years, I wasn't the one who was afraid. The countdown was over. It was time for the impact. The kitchen felt smaller than it had 5 minutes ago. Mark's hand hovered over the yellow envelope, his fingers trembling. He didn't want to open it. He knew that the moment he broke that seal, the version of himself he'd sold me for 6 years would vanish. Mark, what is she talking about? Lorraine's voice was climbing an octave. She looked from the lottery receipt to the envelope and back again. "What's in there? Is it the car insurance? I told you I'd help with that." "It's not the insurance, Lorraine," I said. My voice was the only steady thing in the room. "Go ahead, Mark. Tell her. Tell her about the consulting work you've been doing at 3:00 a.m. on offshore servers." Mark didn't move. He looked like he was trying to fold into himself. "Fine," I said. I reached across the island, snatched the envelope, and ripped it open. The sound of tearing paper was loud in the silence. I pulled out the 19 pages and spread them across the granite. I fanned them out like a deck of cards, itemized bank statements, credit card applications with my forged signature, and page after page of gambling logs. "What is this?" Lorraine hissed, grabbing a handful of the papers. She squinted at the lines. "Blackjack, sportsbook, $2,000 deposit. Mark, what are these?" Mark finally snapped. He slammed his fist onto the counter. "It's a system, Mom. It's a mathematical system." I was close. I was so close to hitting the parlay that would have cleared the house and the cars in one night. I just needed a little more runway. "Runway?" I asked. I stepped closer to him. "You used my identity to open a $22,000 personal loan while I was working a double shift to pay for the groceries you ate. You stole the escrow refund check from the bank. You've been skimming my paychecks for years. That wasn't a system, Mark. That was a parasite eating its host. I did it for us." He yelled. He stood up, trying to tower over me. "I wanted us to have more than a nurse's salary. I wanted a life where we weren't just scraping by. If I'd won, you wouldn't be complaining. You'd be on the boat with me." "But you didn't win," Chloe said from the corner. Her voice was cold and sharp. "Nora won. And she won because she's the only one in this house who actually works for a living." Mark whirled on her. "Get out of my house, Chloe. This is none of your business." "It's my house, Mark," I said. I pointed to the deed record I'd pulled that morning. "And as of the separation papers I signed at 2:00 a.m. this morning, you are a guest here. A guest who owes me over $100,000 in marital assets you dissipated through illegal gambling." Lorraine was still frantically reading the papers. Her face was turning a mottled purple. $114,000? Mark, you told me the $4,000 I gave you was for the bridge loan. You told me you were helping Nora with the taxes." "He lied to you too, Lorraine," I said. "He's been using your emergency fund to chase losses on 4:00 a.m. basketball games in Europe. He didn't care who he bled dry. You, me, the bank, it didn't matter as long as he had another stake." Lorraine looked at her son. For a second, I saw a flicker of genuine horror in her eyes. Then her face hardened. She turned that look on me. "You did this," she spat. "You're the one who pushed him. You were always so cold, so focused on your work, never giving him the support a man needs. If you'd been a better wife, he wouldn't have had to look for an escape. And now you're going to sit on $400,000 while your husband is in debt. You're a monster, Nora." She took a step toward me. She didn't just look at me with hate, she looked at me with a kind of desperate entitlement. "You're going to pay off those debts, every cent. And then you're going to give Mark half of that lottery money. It's the law. He's your husband." "No," I said. "He wasted 6 years on you," Lorraine shrieked. She leaned in, her face inches from mine. "He gave you the best years of his life, and you're going to throw him away like trash now that you're rich? Pay up or we sue. I'll hire the best lawyers in the state. I'll tell everyone what a heartless, calculating woman you are." Then she did it. She leaned back and spat. The spit landed right on the toe of my shoe, then slid down to the hardwood floor. It gleamed there in the morning light, a wet, disgusting mark of her contempt. The room went dead silent. Chloe's coffee mug hit the counter with a loud thud. She didn't drop it, she set it down so hard I thought the granite might crack. "Did you just spit at her?" Chloe whispered. I didn't move. I didn't wipe my shoe. I just looked at the spit on the floor, then up at Lorraine. She was panting, her chest heaving, looking like a cornered animal. "That's the last time," I said. My voice was very quiet. "That is the absolute last time you will ever disrespect me in my own home." "I'll do more than spit," Lorraine screamed. "I'll take everything you have. Mark, get your things. We're leaving, and we're going straight to a lawyer. We'll have a lien on this lottery check before the bank opens tomorrow." Mark was already moving. He'd grabbed 2 duffel bags from the closet, bags he'd apparently packed the night before, thinking he was the one who was going to leave me after he got the lottery cash. He dragged them into the kitchen, the zippers clacking against each other. "She's right, Nora," Mark said, his voice regaining that arrogant edge. "You think those 19 pages mean anything? A judge will see a wife trying to hoard a windfall. We'll tie you up in court for years. You'll spend half that money just on legal fees. Give me 200,000 and I'll walk. Otherwise, I'm taking the house and the winnings." I looked at him. I looked at the man I'd shared a bed with for 6 years. He was smiling now. He thought he'd found the leverage. He thought he could bully me into one last payout. "You really didn't read the papers, did you, Mark?" I asked. I picked up the last page of the yellow envelope. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a formal affidavit from Marcus's office, along with a copy of the state's marital dissipation laws. "In this state," I said, reading slowly, "any assets lost through the commission of a crime or through unauthorized gambling are considered dissipated. That means they are deducted from the offender's share of the marital estate. You've lost $114,000. My lawyer has already filed the petition. The court will credit that $114,000 against your half of the house equity. Since the house equity is only $80,000, you actually owe me money." Mark's smile faltered. "As for the lottery," I continued, "the ticket was purchased after the legal separation agreement was signed digitally this morning. It's a separate asset. You have no claim to it, not a penny, not a cent." Mark grabbed the paper from my hand. He read it, his eyes darting back and forth. This isn't right," he stammered. "You can't just sign a separation agreement without me." "I can when I have proof of financial fraud and identity theft," I said. "Marcus is waiting for your call, Mark. He's also the one who suggested I mention the word forgery to the district attorney if you decide to contest the house." Mark went completely pale. The duffel bags dropped from his hands, hitting the floor with a heavy, hollow sound. He looked at the 19 pages again. The numbers were staring back at him, a mountain of debt that he no longer had a workhorse to climb for him. "You're bluffing," Lorraine said, though her voice was shaking. "You wouldn't send him to jail, you loved him." "I loved a man who didn't exist, Lorraine," I said. "I'm done being the safety net. You want to support his vision? Go ahead, he's all yours, but he's leaving this house with nothing but those bags and his debts." Mark turned to the kitchen island. He looked at the lottery receipt one last time. He reached out a hand, almost as if he wanted to touch the number. "Nora, please," he whispered. "I have nowhere to go. My credit is destroyed. I can't even get an apartment." "You should have thought about that before you used my social security number to fund your system," I said. Lorraine stepped forward, her eyes darting between the papers on the counter. She finally focused on the page that listed the total debt, not just the marital part, but the private loans, the secret cards, and the interest. $114,000, she whispered, and the $14,000 from the collection agency, and the $22,000 for the new loan. She started to do the math in her head. I watched her realize that her emergency fund was gone, her son was broke, and there was no more money coming from me. The lifestyle she'd been living, the wine, the takeout, the leisure, it was all funded by a woman she'd just spat on. "It's over, Lorraine," I said. "The bank is closing. The ATM is out of order." Lorraine's eyes rolled back in her head. She let out a small, choked gasp and her knees buckled. She hit the floor right next to the spot where she'd spat. She didn't fall hard, but she was out cold, her head resting against the base of my kitchen island. Mark didn't even go to her. He just stood there, looking at the papers, looking at his mother on the floor, looking at me. "I'm calling an ambulance for her," I said, picking up my phone. "And while they're loading her up, you're going to put those bags in your car. If you're still here when the police arrive to escort you out, I'll have them take a statement about the credit card fraud." Mark looked at me. He looked like he wanted to say something, some final lie, some last-ditch effort to charm me. But he saw Chloe standing there with her phone out, recording the whole thing. He saw the coldness in my eyes. He didn't say a word. He grabbed his bags and walked out the front door. I stood in my kitchen, listening to the sound of his car tires on the gravel. I looked at the spit on the floor. I took a paper towel, sprayed some disinfectant, and wiped it away. The room was quiet. The sun was shining through the window, hitting the granite. "You okay?" Chloe asked. I looked at the lottery receipt. I looked at the 19 pages of debt that were now officially his problem, not mine. "I'm fine," I said. "I'm better than fine." I walked over to the sink and poured myself a glass of water. It was the first time in 6 years I didn't feel like I was drowning. I was standing on solid ground, and for the first time I didn't have to carry anyone else to stay there. The public reversal wasn't just about the money, it was about the truth. Everyone in our neighborhood, every friend we had, every collector who called, they would all know now. They would know that Nora wasn't the failure. They would know that Mark was the one who had gambled away everything, and Lorraine was the one who had helped him do it. The liar had lost control. The workhorse had left the barn. And as the sirens of the ambulance got closer, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was the one who had dropped it. The fallout wasn't as loud as I expected. Once the ambulance took Lorraine away, she was fine, just a panic attack and a bruised ego. The silence that settled over the house was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. Mark moved into Lorraine's one-bedroom apartment, sleeping on a cramped sofa in a room filled with her clutter. I didn't have to follow the updates. Chloe's husband worked in the same circle as some of Mark's consulting buddies. Word got out fast. The visionary was broke, and the workhorse had the $412,000. I sold the house 2 months later. I didn't want the rattling HVAC or the memories of scrubbing peanut sauce off the counters. After the lawyers finished with the marital dissipation claim, Mark walked away with zero equity and a mountain of debt that followed him like a shadow. Last I heard, a collection agency had finally caught up with him, and they were garnishing 40% of his wages from the warehouse job he'd been forced to take. I'm 29 now. I still work at the hospital, but I don't work double shifts. I work because I love the medicine, not because I'm afraid of the mortgage. The best part of my day is the morning. I sit in my new kitchen, a small, bright space with white cabinets and a window that looks out over a park. No one tells me it's a mess. No one asks me for a refill. Chloe is usually there, sitting across from me. We don't talk about the debt or the yellow envelope much anymore. We talk about where we're going for dinner or the trip we're planning for the fall. I realized you can't buy your way into the hearts of people who only see you as a bank. You can give them your years, your sweat, and your soul, and they will still ask why you didn't give more. The only way to win that game is to stop playing. What was the exact moment you realized you were being used? Was it a look, a comment, or a bank statement? Drop your location and local time in the comments and tell me about the hardest boundary you ever had to draw. Sometimes, saying no is the most expensive thing you'll ever do, but it's the only way to buy back your life. If you want to hear about another family destroyed by secret debts, check out the story of the Golden Son on the channel. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of truth and turning the tables.